are still waiting for more people to be admitted to the room. So we have as many as 34, 33 people who've already come in. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Sage Advice to this evening, and congratulate everyone who's first of all taken this courageous step to walk into a room where we're going to discuss grief. Not an easy thing to address, and especially in the torrid, difficult, tumultuous times that we're living in, where we dread even picking up our phones and looking into whatever notification is next come in. Is it bringing the news of another ailing dear one in some part of the world which we can't access, which we can't reach, maybe the same town, the same city. But as COVID continues to wreak its havoc on all our lives, it continues to impact all our families. It's become very important to understand how we are grieving and how we need to address this elephant in the room. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. The topic that we want to discuss today in our webinar is dealing with grief in COVID times. Who are we? We are Sage Advice. And as we go along, we'll be introducing our initiative, our effort. We'll just give another 5 minutes for people to settle in, and probably at 5:05, we'll begin with our evening's proceedings. Thank you for your patience. I'll also take this opportunity to introduce a wonderful team that's working behind the scenes. We've got Bonnie Bera here, who's managing the clicks and the usher-ins and the work behind the scenes. He's a young, enthusiastic intern with Sage Advice, our organization, and we'll be introducing you to the organization also very soon. We've got Masira here, who's going to be there available to you on the chat, and she'll be taking in all the traffic, the questions that you'll be giving us. And there's also Fiona here, who's done the beautiful work on the slides and everything creative that you're going to witness through this webinar. Hopefully you'll find everything soothing and relaxing as we go to this evening. So that's the team that's working hard behind the scenes. So these are the names we'll be taking very often. So Bonnie, before we move further, can you let me know if there are a lot of people still waiting in the waiting room? You're getting them in?
No, sir, we're good to go.
Good to go. So I'll take another minute and then we start. And we could begin with our first little video introduction to Sage Advice, and then we go further from there. I think we can begin, and welcome everybody. So first of all, thank you for taking out the time, finding the courage to come and talk about this shared grief that is so common and so much within us that it's hard to ignore, hard to push under the rug, and equally difficult to cope with. But let's see what we can do about it today. So we begin with a brief introduction of what Sage Advice is all about. We are an online counseling portal, and this brief 2-minute video is going to give you an introduction to the work that we do and we intend to do, and then we'll begin the conversation. Thank you.
Sage Advice for a better life. We are a 24/7, 365 days online counseling portal. We provide wholesome guidance and support to people in times of need. With a panel of qualified and experienced counselors available around the clock to listen, understand, and guide you through, Sage Advice is a social enterprise driven by its vision of a happier society and people leading empowered, richer, and fulfilling lives. We strive every day to help you navigate through life with lesser stress and worry. Our general counseling vertical is very well complemented by wellness and life coaching. Our life and wellness coaches, also available all the time, are constantly inspiring you to strive and to be the best version of yourself. Sage Advice has a core belief that all aspects of human life must function well together, like an orchestra where all instruments are in perfect harmony. With this view, we offer career counseling for students both at school and at the college level. Our career counselors also bring several years of experience and astute judgment to help you navigate through career change, countering work stress, and help make strategic decisions if you contemplate a career shift. Sage Advice is all about self improvement, growth, and healing, be it the body, mind, or your relationships. We help you break barriers, fight complexes, overcome fears, shame, and vulnerability to forge ahead with extreme confidence and claim a better life.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for that. Dealing with grief in COVID times, that is the subject we want to take on today. Grief. Five-letter word, but not so easy, not so light. It's heavy. And like our chief executive also here, Neeraj Thapar, who's joined us, he comes from a marine engineering background, and he'll identify and he'll remember this. Many, many years ago, before the oxygen cylinders that we are in dearth of and proper diving gear came in, people would go down deep under the sea to explore life there. But then, given your body weight, it wasn't so easy to quickly reach the depths of the sea, explore, and then come up again for a breath of air. And what people used to do was use diving bells. These diving bells were heavy chunks of metal tied to people's legs, and they would quickly take you down to the ocean floor, and then you would untie your legs and come up. Now, when you go down, you explore a lot of things. You explore the wonderful coral life, the magnificent thing under the sea, and grief is something like that. It's like a diving bell that quickly takes you down the depths of your own life, your own experiences. But then, if you do not untie yourself at the right moment and release yourself from that diving bell, you will not be able to come up to the surface for a breath of fresh air. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to understand how do we untie that diving bell that takes us down into the depths of sorrow and misery and pain. And I'd like to start off and set the tone for today's evening with a story. And the story is called Sandwich. Now, there was an 11-year-old kid who was taking his half yearly exams, and after a Hindi paper, he rushes back home. And in the morning, his father, who'd been unwell, had been rushed to the hospital in a state of emergency. And he's just barely taken off his school uniform and is trying to assess how well he's done in the paper when he hears his mother coming in from the main gate of the house, wailing and saying, "All is over. He's gone. We've lost him." And that's when that's when everything goes numb. Everything goes into absolute total silence. And he doesn't recall the time that elapsed from there on till the late evening But at 8 o'clock, somebody thrust a sandwich in his hand because he had to eat. Now, that sandwich tasted like sand. And sand was probably stuffed into that sandwich, and the bread tasted like shards of glass because it was too salty. Maybe the tears streaming down his face were mixed with that butter on the sandwich, and he could barely take it down his throat. And the second experience was absolute numbness and complete, utter silence all around him. That silence is when grief numbs you. And that taste of sand and glass remains forever. Now, this particular sandwich has been in the deep freeze of my subconscious mind for the last 37 years because I was that kid and I was the one eating that sandwich. And this is how I recall that grief, which has become over the years a shapeshifter. It's gone on to become stories, poems, writings, relationships. It's influenced decisions, it's affected choices, and it has matured, grown up, sobered, and now wisened up a little. It's evolved to a point where now I understand that grief is a common denominator. It's a part of life. When you start off questioning everything. Then gradually it becomes a common denominator that connects all of us, human beings. And that's the reason I sit here opening this dialogue, this conversation, because like you all in this room, I've had my own tryst with grief. You've all had it too. So we all are carrying that burden of grief today on our shoulders, which is like heavy cement bags. And no wonder there's certain mornings these days we're not able to crawl out of bed because we feel that this grief is weighing us down, especially when today in the COVID times, every family is impacted. We are getting news from left, right, and center of loss. There's not even enough time to grieve one loss, and the second one hits us. What do we do? That's when we got together and we thought that we've got experts. It's taken me 37 years to let that grief grow wise enough to become a friend. It has taken 37 years for it to deepen me and create enough space in me to accommodate other people suffering in grief as my own, as my friends, as my fellow human beings suffering. But why do we have to wait that long when we've got experts, we've got counselors, we've got psychologists who can help us understand grief? And that's exactly what we're going to do. First of all, I'm going to invite one of our panel counselors, our chief counselor at Sage Advice, Pallavi Khanna. She's a postgrad in medical and psychiatric social work. She brings 3 decades of work experience. And I dare say these days she's in the pursuit of happiness, literally, because happiness पर वो PhD कर रही हैं, and it's great that she's going to bring in a lot of word of wisdom and advice to us today. She'll be duly supported by Swapnil Maurya, another postgraduate in psychology and a counselor with 3 years of experience in counseling. And she also is somebody who will have a strong personal story to share with us, along with Pallavi. So I'm going to hand over the proceedings to the experts now. I've put my grief story out there, and that's the tone for today's evening. I'll encourage you through the conversations to respond, to open up, to put your grief out there in the room today, because this is a safe place where this common ring of grief is our protective space. And a lot of sharing, a lot of bearing, and a lot of caring is going to take place. So I hereby sit back. I want to listen to all the wise words that our counselors have to offer. And Pallavi, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inderjeet. That was a very touching story, and you're right that it has set the mood for what is going to come. Because uh, I am also going to be sharing my personal story as well. So, can we change the slide? So, to begin with, I want to welcome each one of you to this very, very important discussion on grieving. So, as a counseling portal, Sage Advice has been working since a year now. And we have a group of panel counselors and chief counselors who have their own level of and expertise and experience working in different areas of areas that people need support in, psychological support in. But why did we think of doing something on grief? Because, as Inderjeet said, it is not something that you can just sweep under the carpet. Somebody has to talk about it. And though I believe that talking about grief is something extremely uncomfortable, and it also brings up a lot of triggers. I'm in fact, I just like to say that during this discussion or after this webinar, if any of you feel that there is some issue that remains unresolved, I request you to reach out to us immediately. And I do know that these are topics that are going to rake up a lot of memories, a lot of pain, a lot of personal stories as well. And in fact, we encourage you to share them with us. So get out your pen and paper and possibly just start putting down what you would like to pen down for yourself as your journey, as your personal journey of dealing with grief. I'd also request you, we have Masira, who is the chat coordinator, and she would be taking in queries from everyone. She would be going through the chat very, very regularly and making sure that no question remains unanswered today evening. So, to begin with, I wanted to share this quotation. It seemed very apt for today's meeting. This is a quotation by Murakami, taken from Kafka on the Shore. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure, in fact, whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about. So there is a storm raging. There is a there is an overall collective pain and grief that each one of us is experiencing. Inderjeet was absolutely right that we are all very, very fearful and scared of picking up our phone and looking at the messages in the morning. A late night phone call would jolt us all out into a state of, a state of fear, because we wouldn't know who that call is coming from. So I do think I think there's some problem about the sound. Is there some problem about sound, Bonnie?
No, ma'am, it's absolutely fine.
Okay, all right. So I'll continue. Thank you. So, yes, it is about the storm that all of us are in, and seeing what each one of us can do. Can we have the next slide? So, today's webinar is going to take you through uh, what what do we mean by loss and grief. We also hope to help you identify signs and symptoms of grieving. We hope that you're going to take away ways of coping with grief. We will also be discussing challenges which we some of us may face. There are about 15% of people who cannot resolve grief the way it should be. And so we would be discussing that as well. And to know when and how to ask for support. So these would be the learning objectives for this evening. And again, I'm going to repeat that since grief is such a vast area of human experience, I would really like that anybody wanting any other or anyone having any other expectation from this webinar, please share it on the chat. And Masira would be, giving it to us, and we at Sage Advice would be ensuring that each and every query and doubt or question is very, very important and would be addressed. Can we have the next slide? So this is a question that we have all been asking ourselves. And this is a question I ask you. Have you at any time in your life experienced the loss of someone or something very significant so that your life would never be the same again? So this is a question which each one of you have, if you can answer in the chat, I think it would be great. And you could also share what is it that you've lost. And that would also be really helpful for us to understand you. Uh, of course, we all know that during this pandemic, we've lost, let me start from the most insignificant. We've lost material things. We've lost jobs, we've lost money, we've lost, people have probably gone hungry. You know, when you look at, when you read papers of migrant laborers, for example, you read in the paper, you see that there are families and people for whom even food has become a challenge. So, so we've lost uh, means of living, we've lost livelihoods, we've lost life. So I think if we're going to prioritize it, then each loss is going to have its own impact. But of course, the most impactful and the most fearful has been the loss of life. And that's something that we're going to be really zeroing on, and probably, you know, taking you know, there's a saying that you have to take the bull by its horns. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. We are going to be talking about loss of life. We are going to be talking about death. We are going to be talking about losing a loved person. And to begin with, I'm going to start the tone. Indrajit shared his story, and I am going to be sharing mine. So, on the 24th of August 2020, it was a balmy afternoon. I was sitting and working on my laptop, and I received a phone call from my nephew, and in two very straight lines, it was conveyed to me that my sister, who was just about 7 years older to me, that she collapsed. So of course the mind is trying to process it. I was trying to arrange for medical help from here because she was alone in her house in Delhi, and I am in Jalandhar, which is like 500 kilometers away. But I'm trying to find medical help to reach her as soon as possible. I'm not able to do that. And I get on a video call with her domestic help, and he shows me, and I see my sister slipping away in front of my eyes. So from that moment, 24th August 2020, my life has not been the same. So I'm sure that you would ask me that, was this the first loss that I've experienced? No, I lost my parents. I've lost both my parents. I lost my father when I was just 20, and I lost my mom when I was 51. So today I'm 52. So I lost my mother, and in a span of 6 months, I lost my sister. So two losses right back to back. Uh, and I'll also tell you about how losing a parent and losing a sibling can be very different. And also the circumstances under which you lose somebody are also extremely very, very, you know, important. And why I share this is because it impacts the way you process the grief. So since we are talking about grief as being this, uh, it's a huge burden, a sack of cement, as Inderjeet called it. I call it as, I experienced something like someone just took me and flung me into the ocean. Or so every one of you, I'm sure, would have your own metaphors for grief. And uh, the circumstances of unexpected, sudden. I had spoken to my sister just an hour before she collapsed. Just an hour before we were talking, because I talk to her every day. Uh, I spoke to her every day. So So I spoke to her and she was fine. It was her daughter's birthday a day before. We met on the Zoom and cut a cake. So why I'm telling you all this is because she was fine. And that makes it all the more unbelievable for me that one day she was there and the next day she wasn't. So how did I process it? And so being a mental health professional, I would like to share my journey because I feel that when you take the courage to put yourself up there, and though you become very vulnerable, but you need your story to help other people, and sharing your story is also part of dealing with the grief, and that's why I thought that I should do this today. So thank you. Keep your chats coming up. I can see that each one of you is putting up, taking the courage and coming up and sharing with us what you've lost. So the loss is affecting everyone. It's a global grief pandemic. Can I have the next slide, Fiona? So uh, grief is something that, though it is a sack of cement, or it's a big burden, it's a huge burden that each one of us is carrying. uh, it is something that एक बहुत बड़ा बोझ है हम सबके ऊपर, एक बहुत बड़ा एक 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 भारीपन है, which you feel in your chest all the time, or you even you get tired, your body feels tired, you feel so fatigued, you're tired of crying. So बहुत बहुत सारे symptoms है grief के, which we'll be talking later. But right now, I would like each one of you, as I said, you have to have your paper and pen ready, right? So check for intensity. So those of you who have lost somebody very recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, or just like maybe a month back, would probably be on this on the level of intense. Intense is the very, very strong, severe grief where you're not able to focus on anything except your loss. Then we come to moderate, which comes around between 4 to 6 months, wherein you are crying and you are sad, and there are changes in your appetite and sleep. Either you're eating too much or you're eating less. You're not sleeping very well because obviously the person जिसको आपने खोया है वो आपके थॉट्स में, एट स्पेशली रात के टाइम, क्योंकि आप काम नहीं कर रहे हो। दिन के टाइम तो आप अपने आप को बिजी रख सकते हो, लेकिन रात को जब आप सो रहे हो या सोने की कोशिश कर रहे हो, so sleep is something that's affected, but anyway you still come under the category of moderate grief. So जब हम mild पे आ रहे हैं, that is that we are getting better. This is probably around say 8 months to maybe 11 months or so. And then also and then of course you धीरे धीरे आप 2 साल या 3 साल के बाद you come into a normal routine where you've gotten used to an environment or used to living without that person in your life. So एक एक और चीज मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि माइल्ड से दोबारा इंटेंस में जाने में बहुत टाइम नहीं लगता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल जब फर्स्ट एनिवर्सरी आ रही होती है, and then you have to get into the rituals and you have to start again talking about that person and going and doing things. So again, from mild to intense would probably be a very, very quick a visit into intense grief back again. Your mind can take you back into those painful memories of the day that you lost the person. So research has found out that around the first anniversary, the first death anniversary of the person that you love, दोबारा आप intense grief की तरफ दोबारा आना शुरू करते हो. So that is something which is for us to understand and know. So check for whether you are at an intense, a moderate, a mild, or a less than mild, and also know that that people who right now are saying intense need not worry, because you have to acknowledge and accept your pain and work on it, and all through after a little bit of time we'll be taking you through how to cope with it. So to tell you that people do recover and travel from intense to moderate and mild is something that really gives us a lot of hope. Next slide, please. So, where is grief experienced? Grief सिर्फ पहले जैसे लगता था कि ग्रीफ इमोशनल है, क्योंकि ग्रीफ इज एक्सप्रेस थ्रू इमोशंस. यू आर क्राइंग, यू आर looking sad, your face is looking sad, you know, so popular perception to yahi hai ki grief is an emotional component. It has a strong emotional component, but it I would like to share with all of you that it also has a physical component, it has a biological, social, spiritual, and psychological component. And how I'll share with you. Physical component. So a lot of my clients, and I also experienced it, talk about grief at a physical level. Like ये लाइन बहुत सुनने में हमें मिलती है कि ऐसे 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 लगा जैसे that we've been knocked down by a truck, or you hear people say that the wind was knocked out of us. So there is a physical dimension to grief. You can feel that there is some pain somewhere, and there is a physical experience of grief. Coming to biological, it affects your sleep patterns, your cyclical, whatever other patterns of your body, your appetite, everything is affected. So it affects you at the biological level as well. It affects you at the social level very, very, significantly. And what is important for us to know is that socially, you find yourself wanting to isolate. I've known a lot of people who just go into a shell. So this is probably what it does to you. You don't want to connect with anybody, you don't want to talk, you want to just be with yourself. So socially, and at times you want social support, and at this time in the pandemic, people are not getting that social support. So grief has a very, very strong social component. And whether your experience is that you want to be alone, or whether you want to be with people, but here in the pandemic, बहुत बहुत मुश्किल है, क्योंकि हम अगर चाहें भी तो हमारे पास कोई आ नहीं सकता, हमारे पास कोई कोई हमें सहानुभूति नहीं दे सकता. Nobody can give us a hug. Everybody, I think, you need a hug at this time, and you can't get it. So grief has a very, very strong social component, spiritual component, because you ask questions, you start searching for answers, you kind of set yourself on a journey. I think sabse pehle, after a few days, then you begin to question everything, you begin to have a conversation with God, you want to understand where you came from, where are you going, what is this entire journey. So there is a very strong spiritual dimension of grief. Now coming to psychological, definitely leads to anxiety, definitely leads to like we will talk about complicated grief, जिसमें depression भी महसूस होता है if it's not resolved in a proper manner. So it is experienced at the psychological level as well. Now, if I would like to tell you about my experience, I actually experienced it at every level. And why it is important to understand it at every level? Because you have to start healing it also from each level. You have to start taking, and this is something which Swapnil will be talking about in detail, about how you have to do your self-care, how you have to take care of your body, how you have to take care of your sleep. And we'll be talking, I know that sleep is anyway a big challenge these days in the pandemic. So I've been getting a lot of questions from people. In fact, even before this webinar, I had got a lot of questions from people who had registered, and we are going to take it up very soon about, when you're flooded with so much negative news, how can you sleep? So we are going to be taking that as well. So why to understand this? Because it has to be handled also at each level. Can I have the next slide, Fiona? So very briefly, I'll just take you through what is known as a grief cycle, which was given to us by a sociologist, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in which she says that denial is something that happens first, and it's part of the shock and numbness. It's part of the, disbelief. It's part of the, this can't be happening to me. And then anger is when you start saying, why me? Why did this happen to me? So you don't want it, and you're angry because obviously you don't want to be dealing with this difficult situation. So there is anxiety, which anger, if it's unresolved, leads to a lot of frustration, irritation, anxiety. Then comes a dip in the emotion, which is depression, which is then leading to bargaining. In bargaining, like I found myself saying, oh, I wish so my sister was 57 when she moved on, and I found myself saying, I wish she had touched 60, or I wish she just had a few more years. So that's bargaining. And then finally you come to acceptance. So, but let's in the next slide see that grief is definitely not moving in any of these stages. So there is absolutely no kind of, when it's happening to you, you just can't relate to this. And what you can relate to is something I'm going to show you in the next slide. Can I have the next slide, Fiona? Yeah. So can you see this? Grief is not linear. It doesn't come in a line. It doesn't come in stages. It doesn't come as, denial and then shock and then anger and then bargaining and depression and acceptance. It's not like that. It's not straight and simple. It's unique. It's individual. And each one of us, based on however we are as persons, each one of us has a different style for everything. So we have a different style of grieving as well. So grief actually works like the second picture in the diagram, is that it's an absolutely complicated ball of emotions and physical feelings, and the knot in the stomach, and the headaches that you'll experience, the everything that happens to you. And and you can't put it in straight simple phases or blocks. So it's a complicated mess, and you have to deal with it. So, talking about my journey, since I at the outset said I'm going to make it very personal, and I'm also going to open the floor to everyone to share their own story as well. So, my journey was shock and numbness, and then searching and yearning. So, searching and yearning, I began to see her everywhere, and I started looking for her. I started opening her cupboards and searching for her. I started looking on the balcony where she would always stand and watching birds from her balcony. So I started doing that. I started feeling a lot of guilt because I was her primary caretaker. She was a cancer survivor, and I had handled her entire regimen of chemotherapies and everything. So I was her primary caretaker, and I started feeling as if I've not done enough, or what did I do wrong? Then there was fear and insecurity. I started imagining myself. So my sister passed on with a silent cardiac arrest, which silent because she was diabetic, so she could not experience it, she could not feel it, she could not see it coming on, and she just went away just like that. So I started imagining that a person who was talking to me an hour back is not there now, so that could happen to me as well. So I started experiencing palpitations. Then I had to go and see my doctor. And then I took, I had to go through the entire process of an ECG and everything. And then my doctor said, no, you're fine, but you're probably just coping with, this is part of your grief. So then there was clouding and confusion. I had taken off from work. I couldn't work. I couldn't take any decisions. My family started, they could see me staring into space. So my daughter would come into my room and catch me staring into space, not just looking into space and not looking at anything in particular. And then, of course, as I said, the spirituality, so searching for answers. Then another thing that happened to me is I started filling in my sister's shoes. I started trying to do everything that she was doing, reaching out to the people she reached out to, doing stuff like her, always imagining how she would do things, how she would approach a situation, and trying to fill in her shoes. So what is important to understand is that the relationship and the love is there, but the person is not. So how do you deal with the void? So that is basically what the journey is about. And ultimately it's about filling that void with spiritual growth and giving meaning to your life, helping somebody, or doing a good act every day, or doing something and making a difference to somebody's life, and ultimately realizing that let's not make anything a big deal, because there isn't anything really to make a big deal about. So that's my journey. And I would now like to invite my colleague Swapnil to please take over.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And you have already talked about grief so much. So when I talk about my journey with grief, I would like to tell you how I lost my loved one. So it was 26th of November, and it was night at like at around 10 p.m. when we were talking, and I was sitting with my father, and we were whole family sitting together, and we were talking how can he be better and how can he feel better. But after talking on 26th night, 2020, the next morning when I woke up, I saw my father fighting for his last breath. So in one moment he was there, like last night he was there, and in the second following day he was not there. So overall, like you covered shock and numbness, yes, it was there with me as well. And searching and yearning, I would say, and to be frank, it is still there because it's been only 6 months that I've lost him, and I still struggle for my own peace, my own mental peace, my own venting out and everything. So clouding confusion was there initially, where people used to come to me and tell me that you have to take care of your family, you have to take care of your mother. So there was no proper space for me to vent out what I was feeling exactly, and in what ways I was feeling. So it was really a challenging situation for me, where I was in my own cocoon, I was in my own shell, and it got really difficult for me to come out in open and tell people what exactly I am going through, because every second person who used to meet me was telling me that abhi bhaiya nahi aaya hai, so you have to be the supportive pillar for your mother and everything. So people do expect a lot from you. Then they'll tell you ki kash wo ye bhi karke gaye hote, kash wo ye bhi karke gaye hote. But no one really tells you that you can talk to us or you can listen to us. So yes, I have been through the same stages. I have tried my best to fill in shoes of my father. I have tried to imitate his behavior, and frankly, I'm still struggling with the grief. I'm still becoming better. I have used some coping style, which we will cover in the following slides in the end, towards the end. And as far as spiritual growth is concerned, I would say spiritual growth for me is being able to come out open and talk to you guys openly about my father and losing him, becoming comfortable with my own pain, and becoming open and vulnerable here out in public. So this is something which I am going through. So the journey is ongoing. I would say that you move on with grief, but you also learn to live with grief. So you don't really recover from grief ever. That pain will never be gone. It will be there, but yes, you will certainly learn to live with your grief. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So when someone asks you, what do you need? It becomes really difficult to answer them, right? It is very, very easy to ask someone, what do you need? तुम्हें इस समय क्या चाहिए? What do you need right now? Or it is very easy to ask someone कि आप क्या चाहते हैं? आपके मन में क्या चल रहा है? But when someone asks you, what do you need? जब हमारे पे बात आती है तो बहुत confusion सी हो जाती है. So what do we need right now is a step, or it's a state where we will be talking about in what ways we can help ourselves, what can be the coping style that you can use. Can I have the next slide? Coping with grief. So when you are grieving and people are telling you lots of things, then there are various ritual beliefs, there are certain cultural practices that you have to become a part of. Then you are also supposed to sit with every guest of yours and tell them what exactly happened and what ways it happened, what did he say in his last time, what was his last words, everything. So there is a lot of things that you keep on struggling. And then there comes coping, which I think Pallavi ma'am will start, and then I'll cover up. Next slide, please.
So what helped me was reaching out to people. So I am blessed with the support of a lot of a very, very loving family. And I'm a person who can also speak very easily about what I need. So there are people, and I know it's very challenging for them. So people who can't ask for help, people who cannot, uh, you know, reach out, or even for people who possibly, like the ones who are probably introverts, who will tend to keep things in their own within their own selves and not share. So I can understand that it must be extremely challenging for them. So what helped me was that I could reach out. I did reach out. In fact, I took counseling as well, and that helped clear up a lot of my clouding and confusion. Then I indulged in a lot of self-care, exercise and sleep and taking care of myself. And now letting go of negative emotions was extremely important. So all the guilt that I was feeling, so I think the primary emotion I could identify was guilt. So I had to, of course, the others, the self pity and the self blame and the anger was also there. And I possibly it was also a series of letting go of stuff bit by bit. So work, which I love to do, I kind of, yeah, immersed myself in a lot of work. I structure my day. I put in a lot of time. And another thing that helped me was my sense of humor. So I like to laugh. I like to keep things light. So having a sense of humor really takes you very well through grieving. So of course, as I said, that the relationship is there, the love is there. So you have to continue. Of course, there are hard moments, your birthday, your loved person's birthday, anniversary, they're all going to be triggers. And for me, another trigger is when I watch Two Sisters. So I immediately remember mine, so I have my own triggers and I'm aware of them. So possibly working on my triggers, working on my responses, working on what I tell myself, and continuing my loving and grieving. So that's what's helped me. Yes, Swapnil, what would you like to share about what helped you?
Yeah. So
And yeah, and also we'd like to ask our audience, please put in the chat box about what helped you. Please, each one of you have to share with us what helped you and what did you do. Yeah.
So in the meanwhile, while is replying to our questions, like, yeah, they are sharing their experience. I would like to tell you that I was lucky in the first part. I really had some very good friends. I have had some really good friends. I have had some good support from my loved ones who were really patient with me and who actually heard out what I was going through, who were there with me all the time. And because we were there in a scenario where it was really difficult to meet people in person, so it was actually very thoughtful of my friends and my significant others who actually took out their precious time, and they used to check up on me, and they used to tell me, you can talk whenever you want to talk. Then when it comes to self care, initially it becomes difficult to keep a record and keep an eye on what you are thinking or what you are going through. But then with gradual course of time, I started reprocessing, and I started processing my thought processes. And then I started thinking about what negativity am I holding right now, what I am going through. And it was then when I started journaling my grieving in a diary. So I started writing my own experience in this diary. I do write letters to my father, who is not here with me, but I somewhere keep him in my memories, and I write everything which I feel for him in this piece of paper. And I also feel that somewhere it has given me a perspective into my own personality. I have explored different versions of my personality which I was not aware of earlier. Then letting go of negative emotions, yes, I'm not saying that it is not there at all. Little bit of negative emotions are there, but then I am learning every day. Work I love to do, which also gives meaning to my life. Of course, I've been doing, I've been talking, I've been interacting. Then I've been a part of social welfare activities as well. And yeah, like I said earlier, grieving is an ongoing process. It's still happening, and I am learning to live with it. Certainly. Can I have the next slide, please? So when I come to this slide, which is grief guidepost, we are actually trying to tell you how can you help yourself. But before I proceed with these pointers, can someone please come up, and if he's able and if he's comfortable, can someone would like to share? Would someone would like to share what they are going through or what all they went through? If you want to share your experience out in open, only if you are comfortable. Anything will do. Even you are writing, I can see people are writing. If you are comfortable with speaking up about your experiences which you have gone through. Okay, grief guidepost is a slide which actually talks about what can be the coping style and what are the steps that you can take. First one is acknowledging that this is grief. If you listen, if you have heard what Pallavi ma'am talked about, seeing her sister everywhere, and same happened with me as well. I used to search for my father everywhere. I still yearn for him. So acknowledging that this is grief is a feeling where you have to accept that you are grieving. You have to acknowledge that there will be anniversaries, there will be memories, and there will be days when you will actually crave for your significant other's presence. For me, it was the last Holi. For me, it was various occasions like the upcoming anniversary of my parents. My father will not be here, but then I have to accept it. I have to acknowledge, okay, this is grief and this is going to happen. So certainly you have to get comfortable with all these absence because this is a permanent loss. Honoring the uniqueness of your grief. So my journey and Pallavi ma'am's journey is very different, right? So person to person, the grief will vary. Your grief can be very unique. Your grieving style can be very unique. We are not saying that grief has a unique process, or we are not saying that grief has a linear process. It's not standardized. No grief professional will tell you that okay यही होना है, इसके अलावा आप कुछ feel नहीं कर सकते हो. So as per your personality, your grief will vary, and you need not label or name tag your grief as abnormal, right? So there can be sudden outbursts, there can be confusions, there can be clouding of thoughts, there can be multiple things with you in the process of grieving. Permission to feel all your feelings. It's important to vent out. It's important to acknowledge your feeling. It's important to actually permit yourself to let go and not be really hard on yourself. Because even I have been like this. I have tried so hard to control everything in my life, control all the responsibilities, follow everything that is supposed to be done. So this should not really happen. You should actually make yourself out there vulnerable and ready to accept that okay, even you can fall down at times. Pallavi ma'am, would you like to talk about reaching out for help?
Yeah, absolutely. You should reach out for help when you feel that you are not healing, because as time goes, you're supposed to be healing. And but I, as I mentioned, that there are some people who don't heal, people who are angry, people who are sad or crying. So you could have symptoms of either clinical depression, anxiety, or post traumatic stress disorder. So if you have any of these symptoms, and these symptoms you can see on the Sage Advice website, you know, all the signs and symptoms of all these three conditions which I've met are there on the Sage Advice website. Please go scroll, do a self test there. And if you are either of these three, then reach out for help. That's my advice, that you need to reach out, and you need a professional to take care of uh, your grieving process.
Yeah,
Hello.
and when you talk about nurturing yourself, in nurturing yourself, we are talking about taking care of yourself, eating well, drinking well. Do not keep yourself hydrated. Can I have the next slide, please, where we are having the self-care plan? Yeah, next. Okay, before that, okay, yeah, stay on this self-care plan. Yeah, so nurturing yourself has a step which we have prepared for you people. Self-care plan, so it's not mandatory that only the grieving person can do the self-care plan. It is for anyone, or any person who is actually going through some confusions or some clouding in his life. But because we are talking about grief, so it is specifically bounded to that. in self-care plan, we are actually asking our subject and our clients to have a reflection and retrospection in their own personality. Make your overall goals for your well-being, because grieving will always make you weak. Grieving will actually keep you in places where you can actually be very closed and you will not be very comfortable. So what we are going and what we are actually suggesting in self-care plan, that you need to give yourself a direction. You need to try yourself, try your best to become better and better and better. So the first point is my overall goals for my well-being. So you can just write it down somewhere, or you can just click a picture of this slide or whatever. This self-care plan is for every person who really wants to give direction to their whole thought process. So the columns are my overall goals for my well-being. What exactly are you planning? What is your overall goal in the long run? How do you want to become better and better? My support system, what can be the possible resources that you can rely upon? It can be your loved one, it can be your pet, it can be a NGO, it can be a social activity that you want to become a part of. Then when you talk about physical self-care, which is the first column, physical self-care involves guided meditation. Then you can also have exercise in it. You can work out, you can take out all your negative energy, and you can actually channelize your negative energy into positive energy by working out more. When you talk about emotional self-care, you need to sit down with yourself and talk to yourself, feel yourself, and let yourself feel whatever you are feeling. Even if you are feeling weak for a moment, you have to let yourself feel that. This is what emotional self-care means. But yes, in that process, you just do not have to cry and cry and cry and cry all day. You have to think of a better way. You can actually start writing it down on a piece of paper, or you can actually write letters to the grieved one. There are multiple activities you can do. And then spiritual self-care, of course, you can always feel your loved one around you. You can also have this idea in mind that okay, it is an energy. You can feel the presence of your loved one in a positive way, right? And remember them in a good way. You can actually keep a corner for your loved one where you can do all his favorite activities that he used to like or he used to love. So there can be various ways via which you can make yourself better. So this is a self-care plan that we were really excited to share with you people. And if you would like to come up with any ideas, any suggestion, you are most welcome.
So thank you so much for that, Swapnil. And before we open the floor for questions, two beautiful things which I read and I want to share. One is that there's a Japanese Zen word called shoji, and it means birth, death. So which means that birth and death are actually divided by a very thin line. And that both, if you're human, you're going to be experiencing both. So I think that is something, when I read it, it really helped me in my acceptance. And the second thing that really helped me was again listening to somebody who was grieving the loss of his loved one, and he said that this grieving is like a blank paper that has been given to me, and it's up to me to write what I want to on it. So look at all these different metaphors and analogies and try and see if you can really become what the person whom you loved and lost would like you to become. So again, I think that for me is a huge motivation and something that really helped. And for those um, who kind of really, as I had mentioned about complicated grief, please don't delay it, and please consult a mental health professional. It is extremely important for you to do so. And so we would like questions. We invite questions. We have Palak Raheja with us. Palak, would you switch on your video? Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening, Palak. Yeah, can you switch on your video also?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Palak. Yeah.
So I'm 33 years old and married with 2 young kids. So I'm quite active on social media and news, which I'm sure everyone of my age is. But since few days, due to my activeness, at the night around, in the day, I'm very busy with kids and my everything. home stuff. So I don't get a lot of negative thoughts. But at night when I'm about to sleep, so I go to bed around 11:30, but I'm not able to sleep till 3:34, thinking about my kids, my husband, and it's constantly running. The thoughts are very negative and they're constantly in my head.
Yeah.
So like, I'm very scared, though it's not in my hands, I know, but still I'm not able to come out of these thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for sharing, Palak.
Yeah.
And I would like to tell you that the time that we are going through is one that there is fear all over, all around, and it is absolutely fine and okay to be scared. So acknowledging your fear and acknowledging that if you are anxious, it's perfectly okay. But but as living with anxiety is not going to, it's not going to help you, and you're not going to be able to sleep properly, and you're not going to be able to do other things properly. So you have to deal with it, you have to work it through. So to work it through, you need to one, stay away from social media, probably like fix a time, maybe after 8 p.m. you're not going to listen to any news, or you're not going to watch any posts regarding the pandemic. So that is something you can do. You can really strictly structure your day so that in the night you are free from any kind of news and the infodemic, which is really, I think, causing a lot of mental stress amongst all of us. So try that, and of course we can help you with a sleep hygiene activity. So that is something that we could do when we connect later. But just to tell all our viewers here who are having anybody having sleep problems, is that what helped me was a kind of a body scan, wherein when you lie down, you kind of let release the tension starting from your toes up to each, go upwards till your head, and feel yourself, releasing stress and relaxing. So this body scan is like a proven and a very good way to sleep, and to release anxiety and stress at night. So another activity that I really try and recommend to everyone who's going through anxiety is called box breathing. So box breathing typically is breathing in to a count of 4, holding to a count of 4, releasing to a count of 4, and then again holding to a count of 4. So box breathing is again a very, very good technique to release anxiety. But most importantly, it is acknowledging and creating that space for yourself, within yourself, that it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to ask for assistance, and it's absolutely normal to go through whatever you're going through. So 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 just follow precautions, do what the right things are, follow whatever the guidelines that the government is giving you, and otherwise just try to be mindful and relax. Okay.
Well put,
So
Pallavi. Am I audible now? I believe at the beginning there was some audio issue.
absolutely audible, absolutely audible.
We have a wonderful guest. In fact, while we collate the questions coming in from our audiences, and I request Masira to do that quickly for us. I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce to our audience somebody who's been active on the chat with a lot of helpful suggestions. And that's Karishma Gaur, who comes in with 15 years of experience as a teacher, as an English teacher. And she creates her own wonderful world of miniatures, lives with her 2 cats, and of course, is a certified expert when it comes to feline first aid. But she's here for a reason with us today, because she's been working with Pallavi for a fairly long time. And she's going to share her journey of pulling through grief in her own words. And I'd rather quieten down, and let Karishma take over. Karishma, please turn on your camera and go ahead. And I'll request Masira too, in the meanwhile, collect all the questions and share with our experts so that they can be quickly answered. So please stay with us because there's something extremely useful that Karishma is going to offer to us. Let's be all ears.
Sorry. Thank you, Indrajit. Can everybody hear me? All right, thank you. And also thank you to SageAdvice for having me on here. This is a real moment of privilege and honor because everybody has such a beautiful story to share, and it's always a matter of pride when I get to speak about this as well. Without taking any more time talking about anything else, I want to get to the point, which is I've had this quote for myself for many years, as many years that I've been dealing with grief, and that's grief is a moving target. I say that because I've not been able to pinpoint it so far, and that's why I just think that grief is always going to be a moving target. So I'm just going to share very few points of what I've learned and what you can perhaps take away from there. The first thing is everything that feels like a loss to you is a loss, and you have to acknowledge that. So it took me time to accept this, and I thought that by being sad about small little things, I was being a baby about it, and I was overly critical of myself. But when I stopped doing that, when I started accepting whatever made me sad, it immediately became easier to deal with it. Next is that you may never be done with grief. At least I'm not. And that's why grief is a moving target for me. It comes in waves and then it disappears for a while. And all this is natural. You might feel one day, oh my God, I'm done. I'm fixed. And then a few months later, you might be in the pit of despair, and you just have to be prepared for all of that. Being sad also translates to being depressed, lonely, angry, anxious, and being all those things at once. Grief stirred some serious mental health issues for me, inside me. And for years, I battled with manic depression. And today I live with high functioning depression. But I no longer treat it as a mental health issue. Although I have those, I think of grieving as part of living. And you have to also acknowledge that you might not know a lot of people who have been through grief. And so they might not resonate with you, and that's fine. If somebody has not experienced loss like you have, they might not have the emotional bandwidth to meet you halfway. So you have to allow for those people to also be in your life. When things were truly bad for me, I started looking even more outwardly for help. And that's when I sought out the nearest animal shelter and started volunteering there and fostering kittens at first. So that aided me in feeling in control of things, feeling useful, like I mattered. Over time, it blossomed into a passion, and I educated and trained myself in as much veterinary information as I could. And today I'm a certified first responder for feline rescue. So that only happened because I did something with my sadness. But more than this, I found healing through animals, which I didn't think was possible. And I urge everybody to volunteer with shelters. But this comes with a huge caveat. Do not take this as an encouragement to adopt animals without planning, only to abandon them after a year or when you can't handle it. Be responsible for your choices when it comes to animals, because they can never ask you why you're leaving them. Personal experience. Being good to yourself is a foolproof plan. What works can change over time, so no one solution will work for life. So be ready to change and experiment with many different things as you grow older. That's just something that your body will demand, your mind will demand. So yeah. Investing in hobbies is a lifelong healing process that bears very sweet fruit. I found miniatures when I was at the peak of my anxiety, and I wasn't taking any pills. I couldn't afford counseling. I managed to work out the worst of it by working on miniature doll houses. And today, whenever I feel anxious, whenever I feel like I'm slipping away, I find myself feeling drawn to miniature work, whether it's looking at them on YouTube or making my own, whichever my pocket allows. But I still do that, and because it instantly makes associations of happiness and peace for me. And finally, I'm talking to the people who have periods on here. We need to not confuse cyclical symptoms with more enduring emotional ones. Periods make everything worse, so remember to be extra cautious around the more challenging phases of your cycle, and also be aware of what your cycle does to you. For me, ovulation is lovely and filled with sexual desire and passion, but pre-ovulation and PMS are awful and bring back dark instincts from when I was thinking about self-harm. So I have to be very mindful of my body calendar. And that's why I use apps to make sure that I record when I get a migraine, when I get a mood swing. And it takes me back really quickly to, oh, this is a hormonal thing. And then I can accept it and move on. So how grief works, what I've learned is that it changes a person. I became a solitary, insular person. You might not, and that's all okay. Be ready to be changed by grief, for better or for worse, and just remain mindful. Um, the book that I've been trying to write for a couple of years now is titled Losing, and it's a compendium of all the death and loss that I've suffered, but with an Irish wake sort of a celebratory feel to it. So today I know I want to write away the beauty of what I had instead of lamenting what I lost, and remind others that losing is part of living too, but it took me 5 years to get here. So thank you for giving me the time and your attention. I will leave you with a quote from Marcus Aurelius of Stoicism, which is, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. I hope you can find something useful out of that. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Karishma. That was wonderful and insightful, and it's good to see you the place where you are, because it sort of reminds me of a Khalil Gibran quote, and I would also connect that with Shweta Reheja, who had put in a message in the chat as well. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. And I think the kind of depth and new dimensions it adds to us, it's something that we always look back in hindsight and then stop questioning, why me? Because it brings maturity, it brings a lot of humanity into us, and we have to let it carve as deep as it goes. So, Pallavi, there's another question which I believe a couple of people had put, and I'm going to put it and pose it on behalf of like Ritika Mahajan, who's here. She'd mailed as well, and somebody else had also reached out to us, putting this question: how about fear? Because even C.S. Lewis wrote that no one ever told me grief felt so like fear. And today, grieving is also being superposed by another riding wave of fear. We are so fearful, we are so paranoid today. How do you cope with that?
Yeah. So, thank you, Ritika. That's something that all of us are dealing with. And I'd like to say that, uh, again, like we are talking about acknowledging feelings, you have to acknowledge your fear. You have to acknowledge that there is a threat, and there is a matter for concern. So whatever fears we are going through, whatever anxieties we are going through, none of them are irrational, unfortunately, at this point of time. At the same time, I think each one of us can really work towards smaller goals and not always thinking about what might happen, because a constant sense of anxiety, a constant sense of uncertainty is going to put us in a flight or fight, a fight mode. And a persistent, constant flight or fight mode is really is something that's going to cause uh, other kinds of issues. You're going to probably have stress related physical or physiological problems, and we don't want to go down that road. We don't want that to add on to whatever else we have on our plate today. So you can, I was just mentioning to Palak about the box breathing, about the different kinds of breathing techniques, the different kinds of um, like putting on some light music while sleeping, or just thinking of good things, thinking of, so acknowledging your grief, but also holding yourself and looking after yourself, and probably trying. And something that really helped me was trying and seeing if I could change the way I felt, and if what you are feeling, if you can change that, you can probably change your thought, and then overall the overall feeling, and the overall mood that you're in can change. So, Ritika, I don't know if you will find that helpful, but yes, probably putting a different narrative inside your mind for now. Again, as I was sharing with Palak, let's go off infodemics, let's go off our social media and the news all the time. Let's go off all that, and let's look at some good uh, valuable information which can help us, and let us reach out to each other for help. Let's share whatever we have, and let's help each other. So I think it's a very useful question, because at this point of time, suppressing your fear is also not going to help, and feeding it too much is also not going to help. So striking that balance somewhere where you know that yes, there is this threat in the environment, but if I take some precautions, maybe I can and my family, I can keep myself safe, and I can keep my family safe. So keeping such kind of thoughts and really focusing a lot on self-care is something that can get us through this pandemic. Um, so
Wonderful. So, any more questions coming in? Because I think we've overshot by a considerable margin of time. We need to quickly wind up now. And if there are any last minute questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and pop in that question. If you have missed out on anything, yeah, please, Masera. Is there something you wanted to share? A question from someone?
Yeah, there has been question by Apurva. He says, while I can cope better on my own, how can I help people near me who are going through a bad phase to help them in their grief and make them calm and composed in tough times?
yes, Swapnil, would you like
Yeah,
to?
so because this is something which actually we were talking about initially as well. Whenever something bad happens in the family, people come to you and they tell you sab theek ho jayega and you need to move on and this and that. The best thing to do in such situation where you are actually handling someone who has, who is grieving, the best thing to first try is not put positive spin on everything they are saying. If they are saying they are sad, do not tell them do not feel sad. If they are saying they feel alone, do not tell them you don't need to feel alone, go out, talk, this, that. Do not say that. For such kind of families, the best thing you can do is be available whenever they need to talk. Keep on checking on them, like once in a while you need to check up on this family, whosoever is grieving nearby. Then what else can you do? Give them practical support. Do not just talk superficially कि एक दिन सब कुछ better हो जाएगा. Please do not tell this to anyone who is grieving. Give them practical support. Ask what they need, क्योंकि possible है कि जैसे घर का कोई important member जब जाता है तो उसकी बहुत सारी responsibilities हैं जो अभी on hold चली जाती हैं. Because क्या होता है कि अभी तक तो वो सब कुछ संभाल रहा था, बट उसकी एब्सेंस बहुत चीज़ों में खलिश डालती है, कसर रह जाती है. If you can help out such grieving family by becoming a practical support, please do that. I think that will help. And yeah, and start practicing these sentences that if you need to talk, I am here. And because this is a situation where you cannot meet family in person, what you can do is just video call them, and do not force conversation. Just wait for them to actually open up and talk. I think initially you can help them with these steps. That's it. I hope you find it hopeful, upwards.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I think we'll quickly.
So there's another question by Akash Jha. He's saying, how can I, who has become so indifferent to emotions that the only active emotion is I can feel is anger and pain, start feeling all the emotions that there are?
Yeah. So that's a wonderful question, and the best way that I can answer is that you seem to be in a lot of denial, and so this probably is your way of coping with whatever's happening by trying to numb yourself emotionally and trying to avoid feeling too many painful emotions. So this is actually a coping strategy, and you're probably taking care of yourself like this. Having said that, I think you need to really get in touch with somebody who can help you feel and experience the entire range of emotions. And long term anger, leads to resentment, and resentment ultimately ruins relationships. So I would like you to resolve whatever emotional crisis that you're going through, and probably learn to expand the emotional repertoire in your within yourself. You need to feel each and every emotion. You need to, so if you don't, if you can share and talk to somebody, you could possibly get the way out of this.
Thank you. I think definitely.
So there's another question. It's by Vishal Goyal. He's saying, I feel lonely and anxious about my next phase of life as my college life would end and job pressure is frightening me.
Yes, Swapnil, please take that.
So this is a very obvious thing. I would say even I go with these kind of fear every single day with the kind of pandemic that we are facing these days. I say I would suggest you, Vishal, if you can try, please focus upon your skills. Make yourself better at what you are good at. Keep on working more and more on your skills, because zamana abhi aisa ban raha hai ki people will not care about your academic degree much, but they will actually focus what you have extra in your box, right? So I'll not tell you कि चिंता मत करो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. No, सब कुछ ठीक तभी होगा जब आप अपनी तरफ से कोशिश करेंगे. Work upon your skills, see what you are good at, explore your interest, and actually try learning more and more things. You can try your hands at learning different activities or any kind of activity that you would love to be a part of, and try to open up more.
That's actually a great piece of advice, because we all need to sort of get ourselves engaged in activities that further our skill set and improve us, because we are living through a very, very
Yes.
transitional phase on a global scale. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone whose questions were very meaningful. And I
So
hope
there's someone who has raised her hand, Sumira. Yeah.
Sumira. Yes, Sumira.
Um, Hi everyone. My question would be relevant to many other people, who are still dealing with grief and loss, but also they want to support their families overseas, especially in this time of pandemic, where they can't be together in a part of grieving with their families. How they can deal with their loss and also support their family with the long distance relationships at this moment.
Pallavi, indeed, that's a very relevant question, which, I think today a lot of families are spread and sort of divided by the oceans and the closed borders and the lockdowns. And when there is loss in such a situation, or when your parents are suffering here and you're helplessly watching them from across the borders, it's a very relevant question. And I think it really needs addressing. Please.
Yeah, yeah. So, Sumira, as Swapnil had shared, that right now reaching out to people and giving whatever support that you can, and taking support whenever you need it, so for families who are not in the country, or are not even in the same city, and have lost people and could not go, so again, I think that you need to allow yourself to feel all the emotions, to work through all, as we spoke about the entire the guilt possibly that you're going to go through, that you could not be there, you couldn't do enough. Um, so dealing with all those emotions, and then allowing yourself to grieve, to allow yourself to talk as much as possible, and reach out for whatever support that you can, whatever resources that are available to you, and and staying connected at this time, I think, is really helping. So would you like to add to that, Swapnil?
Yeah, you have pretty much summed it up. So even I agree with that, what you have said.
Nandini has a question as well. Please
Nandini.
go
Yes,
ahead.
Nandini.
Good evening, madam. This is about the social media, which I keep hearing. There's nothing complimentary in it, and I feel terrible when such news is, spread all across the country. So the minute I hear it, I become so agitated. I've become so, excited. Any what should I say? A positive news I get on the internet or something, I go on sending it to people. I don't know whether it's a kind of phobia Oh man, I mean, thing I'm developing, you know. So since yesterday, I've stopped watching. What should I say? The news in general. Is it right that what I'm doing it just to cope up with my anxiety? Am I sending all the positive? What should I say? Positive approaches to all the others. Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Sending, as long as we are not sending any false information and it's verified information, you can share anything.
Nandini, I'd like to
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
Inderjeet would like to answer that.
add a very quick thing here, because this is something that's very common.
Please, sir.
We go spiraling into this thing that sort of sucks us in, our attention in. So I think a few hours of digital detox and digital silence in the day is very important, because I think when we somehow get hypnotized by social media, which keeps sucking us in all
True.
the, it sort of is a draining experience for the eyes and for the mind as well. So at the end of the day, it gets very difficult to separate the two, actual useful information and noise. So I
Yeah.
would advise that yes, digital detox is a good thing, because too much of participation in that ongoing carnival of news, false or true, is I think, I feel it's injurious to one's mental state of calm.
True.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. And
Okay.
you can see
Thank
all.
you, sir.
Thank you. As you can see, all our handles here. You could follow us on YouTube. You could follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well, because all our upcoming webinars, which are more or less a weekly feature, will be listed there, will be featured there. And we definitely like you to come on to our website, sageadvice.in, and experience the expertise of not just Pallavi and Swapnil, but also another set of 40, 45 experienced counselors who are available there to take care of individual sessions and otherwise as well. And just few parting quotes on grief before we move out. And let Shakespeare also have his say, because he says that, well, everyone can master grief, but he that has it. So I think we all have it. And it's about time we learned a few techniques on how to live with it, how to master it. And there's no shame holding on to grief, as long as we can make room for everything else in life. Let grief also stay. Let it coexist with our life. Let's be accepting. Let's be open to taking it with a pinch of salt and moving ahead in life. And there's this one last thing. I'll go back to my favorite Sufi poet and let's say my soul guide, Rumi, who says that the wound is the place where light enters you. So undoubtedly, we all have open wounds, and they're more opening up today. But that's where the light enters you. Let me circle back to where I began. As a child who shared his story with you, it took me, like it's taken Karishma now, to write a book. I wrote a lot of stories and I published a few, and people would always ask me, why are you writing so much about death and loss? Why all of these stories are sad? I said, they're not sad. They all lead my characters to a place of light, to finding closure. And I think one of the most important things about grief is when at the end of it, at the end of the storm that Pallavi also talked about, that Swapnil also felt, came like a bolt of lightning to her in one night. Can we all reach a place of peace and closure? The moment we find closure on grief, it becomes an ally. And then it's okay. And then we all graduate to share others' grief also. So, on this note, I'd like to thank you all for coming here, for bearing your souls, for sharing your grief, for being willing to talk about it in a very difficult time. And I think, on behalf of Sage Advice, I'd like to thank everyone who's been present here. And a lot of people have shown the patience to stay 30 minutes over the stipulated, over and beyond the stipulated time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all our experts and our team that worked so diligently and so hard behind the scenes. Please stay connected and let's keep praying for the planet to heal soon from what it's going through. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.